Welcome to Oscarsborg Fortress. My name is Morten Svinndal. I'm a retired Navy captain, now guide at the FHM Oscarsborg Fortress Museum, which is located within the walls of the fortress. Behind camera we have Gry Larsson, and we're going to explain for you a little bit about the ship Blücher, which was sunk here in the Drøbak Narrows on the 9th of April 1940. And you can see here that behind me there is a picture of the Norwegian Parliament, and there is of course some symbolism in the fact that the model is heading towards the Norwegian Parliament, because what the Germans planned here was what they called Fall A, which was Plan A, meant to take control of the authorities in Oslo and pretty much carry out a coup that could have made further war actions unnecessary. However, what happened here prevented the coup, but of course just delayed the invasion of Norway. The Blücher was the second ship of the Admiral Hipper class, a brand new class of heavy cruisers, even heavier and bigger than former cruisers had ever been, at a full weight of 18,000 tons. The first, of course, then in the class was Admiral Hipper, which was already operational on 9th of April 1940 and actually headed the group that was heading for Trondheim, while the Blücher was heading the group heading for Oslo. There was also a third ship, the Prince Eugen, but that was not yet ready to be launched. And two more ships in the class, the Seydlitz, which was later decided to turn into an aircraft carrier, but it was never commissioned, and the fifth ship, which was the Lützow. But the Lützow was then sold to the Soviet Union. This, of course, was before Germany and the Soviet Union declared war against each other, and that freed up the name Lützow, which Hitler then decided should be used on the former Deutschland, Deutschland class Panzerschiff, which was then reclassified to heavy cruiser as well. And this new Lützow was then ship number 2 in the group heading for Oslo on the 9th of April 1940. The constructor here constructed a model, used the original drawings, but he had to make some modifications because there were some modifications done on this class of ships. And one of them was that they experienced that the bow here was too flat initially. So they had to raise the front of the bow into more of a clipper bow to actually resist the waves in heavy sea. That of course made some problems as well, because then it was impossible to fire turret A in a flat trajectory. And that was a problem when they came into and close to Oscarsborg Fortress, because they could actually not use that turret against land formations. The second modification was that they built in this single bridge up here. It was initially open, and the third one was that they made this kind of hat on the funnel to provide the smoke from going against the command bridge, and then force the smoke to go to the aft. So with those modifications, then it pretty much should look like it looked on the 9th of April 1940. So a heavy cruiser is the biggest, you can say the biggest warship under the class of battleships, and it was supposed to carry out operations in all aspects of war, and had heavy artillery. It also had substantial air defense, but less anti-submarine capacity. So usually in groups of ships it would be escorted by small destroyers. But it was designed pretty much to outrun what it couldn't outgun And that meant that it could not have too much armor, because it has to be light enough to outrun bigger ships, but of course had the artillery to outgun smaller ships. And the outgunning primarily consisted of the big guns here, the 11-inch, 28 centimeters double towers, which could fire up to 33,000 meters. And it also had a lot of dual-purpose guns, primarily aircraft, anti-aircraft. They're like the double 10.5 centimeters there, or 4-inch, and also some double 37 millimeters here, and some single 20 millimeter guns. Altogether, except for the main artillery, the Blücher had 16 guns on each side, which could, those 16 guns could actually fire between 15 and 20 rounds of shells per second. So that was a substantial firepower. And in addition to that firepower, they also had 4 torpedo installations with 3 tubes each, with the G7 torpedoes, with a load of about 420 kilos of TNT each. And they had a lot of sensors, like we have these optical sensors here, horizontal rangefinders, and also horizontal rangefinders in the big guns themselves. And you also had a radar, one of the first operational radars here, but German sources were quite clear that that radar was not very useful when they got inshore and into the fjord of the Oslo fjord. The ships also carried seaplanes, and you can see a seaplane here on the catapult, and there was a capacity to have 3 seaplanes, but the Blücher on 9th of April only carried 2. There was one here on the catapult, and then there was one in the hangar with folded wings. And these planes also had machine guns and cannons, and could carry 50-kilo bombs in addition to that. So the Blücher on the 9th of April had a complement, a crew of about 1,370. In addition to that, they got on board 822 troops and staff officers. And that, of course, made it pretty crowded on board. And some of those soldiers had equipment like motorcycles with gas on them. They had machine gun ammunition, they had hand grenades, they had anti-tank rockets and things like that. And there was no room for storage of this under the armor deck, which is pretty much here. So they had to store it on deck, and that turned out to be a big problem when the vessel was actually hit. So it was not really operational until May, which also means that the crew was not fully trained, especially not in damage control. And that made it even more difficult, of course, when rounds started to hit the ship and you had 822 passengers in addition to the crew. So the Blücher was the flagship, which means that the Admiral, Admiral Komets, he was here on the command bridge, together with the Captain Voldag. And also on the command bridge was General Engelbrecht, who was head of the 163rd Infantry Division, and was supposed to head the German infantry in Oslo and out of Oslo for the further offensive, and also an Air Force General Sussman on board there. Now, as a flagship, it went ahead of a group of initially 16 vessels, but some of those vessels went with soldiers into the outer forts in the fjord, Rauøy, Bolerne and Horten Naval Base, to take them. So there was 5 ships left out of the group of 16 ships when they entered the Drøbak Narrows. And many people ask, why did they have this flagship, this big ship up front when they passed the very narrow of Drøbak? But we have learned from a signalman Limbach, who was also on the bridge here. He says in his report that Captain Waldag asked Admiral Kummetz whether they should rather have a small destroyer going first, the torpedo boat, like they called it, the Germans. But Kummetz said that they were already late, and if there should be any problem, he didn't believe that. He didn't believe that the Norwegians would actually fire. But he said that if anything should happen, the Blücher would be the one that would take most beating. So that's the reason they sent the Blücher first. So the Germans attacking Norway on the 9th of April 1940, it was pretty much the entire German Navy, attacking on 6 different places with naval ships, with soldiers on board. But they had pretty stern ROEs, or rules of engagement, because the narrative was that we are coming as friends, we're going to help you protect your neutrality against the British. That was also what the soldiers and sailors were told. And as such, they were told not to fire first, and they should have a kind of a peaceful approach, which meant that they came just in a row after each other. And they had the main guns just pointing directly ahead. They were not pointing in different directions to counter any threat. But we know that all the guns were loaded, and they were ready to fire back whenever they were fired upon in anger. And of course that happened when they entered the Drøbak Narrows. It happened about 1,400 meters south of Kaholmen, where the big but very old 28 centimeters or 11-inch Norwegian guns were. And they opened fire with 2 of those guns. They were very slow firing, so that was the only 2 rounds they actually fired from those guns. But the first round actually hit then up in the command tower, and we don't really know what difference that made. And we know that at least a few Germans were killed up in the fire control center for the secondary artillery. And also probably some of the connections between the sensors and the weapons were destroyed, so that it seems like the gun crews were pretty much firing wildly in both directions without any directioning from the fire control. However, the main guns did not fire at all, because they had no military targets to fire towards. The second hit from the main battery at Kaholmen hit actually in the hangar here, and that also ignited the fuel in the plane on the sledge there, and started a fire that was never extinguished. And there were also 4 bombs for the airplanes in that hangar, and those of course exploded. And at a later stage, that fire actually prevented the crew from going from one part of the ship to the other, because it made the vessel operate in 2 parts, more or less. And then, of course, after those 2 initial the rounds from the main battery, the battery on the land side, on the mainland, started firing. That was the Kopos with the 3 6-inch guns, also old guns from 1897, but a bit more rapid firing than the old guns on Kaholmen. And they fired then from the starboard side, and very short range, about 1,000 meters. So that actually made the rounds go almost through the vessel and explode on the port side, inside the vessel. And that started several other fires as well. So probably around 12 to 13 rounds from the Kopos that hit the vessel as well. We know that Captain Waldag on the command bridge, he ordered full speed ahead when the firing started. However, one of the rounds, probably from Kopos, hit the cable to the rudder, and it seems like the rudder was then locked in, the rudder back here was then locked in a port turn, and that port turn, same as they had the port turn, the vessel accelerated, and it was then accelerating against northern Kaholmen, where the torpedo battery is situated. So the captain had to have full speed backwards on the starboard propeller, which kind of twisted the vessel back in the shipping lane, but also took all the speed out of the vessel. So it went into the fire area of the torpedo battery with about 6 or 7 knots. And then 2 torpedoes hit in about 20-30 seconds between them, just behind the funnel, 3 meters under the waterline here. And it turned out that the ship had a belt of armor, but it went only 1.7 meters under the surface. So this was under the armor belt. And it seems like those 2 torpedoes hit 2 connected rooms. It was the aft boiler room and the forward turbine room. And that destroyed the connections between the boilers and the turbines, and also made the engines stop. One of the mysteries we have here at the museum, and that I also had when I wrote my book about Colonel Eriksen, was that the German sources say that the torpedoes hit here in 2 connecting rooms, while Colonel Eriksen, the commander of the fortress, said that 1 torpedo hit further to the front and 1 in the middle of the ship. And the problem is that Colonel Eriksen could not really have seen that, because he was in the main battery, which was then several hundred meters south of the vessel, and it was very difficult for him to see whether it was up front or in the middle of the ship. But probably he learned, before he wrote this report in August, he learned from Lieutenant Blücher, who was an engineer on Blücher and was the first German commander after the capitulation here on Oscarsborg. And this lieutenant probably told him that when the second in command came out of the command bridge here, he saw that this torpedo had just vanished. This torpedo installation here had vanished, and there was a big hole in the deck here. And this 4-inch had then almost been lifted out of its installation as well. So there had been a huge explosion here. So I think that probably Colonel Eriksen guessed that one of the torpedoes had hit under here and actually made one of the torpedoes or all the torpedoes here to explode. However, if the report from the German chief engineer is correct, the torpedo hit back here and could hardly have caused an explosion like that. So I think, I don't know, but I think that it was maybe the army ammunition that was stored here that started to fire. We know that there was a fire here with exploding hand grenades, with motorcycles, with fuel and everything. And that may have spread to the torpedoes itself, because the torpedoes here were armed and then made an explosion here. That's more probable than the Norwegian explanation, actually. So we know that there were several explosions like that, and that ammunition was exploding all the time. So after the hits from the torpedoes and the artillery, the ship just drifted northwards against the current, actually, and about a nautical mile. And then it was listing heavily. The captain decided to anchor beside some islands called Oscarsborg, and when he did so, the vessel turned around and got the bow southwards and the aft northwards. And after a while, there were several explosions, and they found out that they had to abandon ship. And doing so, they didn't really have any boats here. They just had one, because the crane here had no power, so they couldn't set out those boats. But they could use one of these cutters here, and that was used to get the injured people into to land and to the beach. The soldiers and sailors on board would have typically 200, 300, 400 meters to reach shore, either on the islands of Oscarsborg or in the shores of Hallangen. and they used life vests and everything they could find, but the soldiers on board had not been instructed on what to do. So they tried to get everything they could find and get to land. And of course, there were not enough life vests because they hadn't got additional life vests for the soldiers because there was so much secrecy here again. So we know that some of the sailors actually gave their life vests to the soldiers, and that seemed to be not a blessing because they used so much time to get in there. So it seems like more soldiers with life vests actually died out of hypothermia than the sailors without life vests did. But we'll come back to that in another film we have about what happened to the survivors. So this is pretty much what we know about the ship and what happened to the ship. There's also one question I often get is what actually sunk the Blücher? Was it the artillery or was it the torpedoes? And the best man to answer that was probably Fregattenkaptein Tannemann, who was the chief engineer on the Blücher. And he said that the torpedoes alone would not have sunk the Blücher. The artillery alone would not have sunk the Blücher. So it was probably the combination that made it sink. But also, of course, that they had all those passengers on board and all that ammunition stored on deck did not help very much. So I hope you enjoyed this history, and we're going to post more videos on YouTube. So please just subscribe, and then you will get an automatic message whenever we have a new YouTube video for you. Some of them are in Norwegian, but we have texted some of the Norwegian videos as well, and we will do even more of the videos in English as well. And if you ever visit Norway, please visit Oscarsborg Fortress and ask for a guided tour with FHM Oscarsborg Fortress Museum and not by other actors, because we're the only one who actually show you the torpedo battery, and you cannot visit Oscarsborg without visiting the torpedo battery. Thank you.